Ultimately, if we care about wildlife, if we care about just knowing it's out there, if we care about catching that glimpse of a moose, if we care about being able to hunt, if we care about being able to go out and photograph it, if we care about it individually, then there are actions that all of us individually and within our organized communities, our towns, our conservation, our planning commissions, we can take. So this is an effort to have long-term health of our wildlife that is going to be the responsibility of all of us, and it will only ever work if towns value having wildlife. And so I kind of look at it in three different ways. First of all, it's awareness. And we've got folks working with various different communities in these different linkage areas in Vermont who are saying to towns, you are special. We talk about the regional need for connectivity. How might a moose, how might genetics between a bear population get from the Tug Hill Plateau to the Adirondacks to the Greens, up into the Suttons across to Maine? They get there through your backyard. So what we're trying to do is say to towns, are you aware of what is happening in your backyard? Is it of value to you? If it's of value to you, here are various different ways, articulating it in your town plan, looking at how you might want to organize the zoning in your town, looking at various tools out there, which might be conservation easements, which might be land purchase, but it all comes down to what do you as an individual, as a community care about? If this is something you care about, we've got ways to help you.
And what kind of response are you getting so far?
You know, it's actually been really fascinating, and so this is kind of a new approach. So we actually have a coordinator who's working in the Adirondacks to Green linkages, and we have two coordinators who've been working part-time in the Northern Greens. And so it really depends on where a town is in some of their cycles of working on a town plan. It also depends on how active conservation commissions are. But we're having all kinds of fun things start to happen to raise awareness first, whether it's working with schools and working on wildlife trails, whether it's bringing in Keeping Track, who's another fabulous Vermont partner, to really do some citizen science and understand where the wildlife move in the town. Up in the Northern Greens, there are 7 towns, includes Belvedere, Enosburg, Montgomery, where a group of local individuals have formed an organization called Cold Hollows to Canada. And they're saying, great, we care about wildlife, we care about connectivity. How can we, as citizens of this group of towns, start raising awareness, get interest from other people in the town, and then potentially look at taking actions? So then, for example, Enosburg and Montgomery are 2 towns who are starting to talk with the Vermont Natural Resources Council about what is the advice that they can give them to move forward. But it's really, it needs to be when a town is ready, when there is interest.
You can't push them.
No, absolutely not. And this has to come from the individuals and from the community. Because if we are going to have a healthy wildlife population, we're not talking about 5 years. And we are talking about when you want to take your daughter out hunting, or when you want to take your son out to go and spot some moose and figure out the photography. We're talking about 2 generations and 3 generations. So this needs to be a value that we say we care about, that the towns then adopt.
And the wildlife is related to the habitat and to the wildness of the land. Is that not correct? Which again doesn't have to be an officially designated wilderness area. You use the term wildland. It does, which can be, it's the value, it's how it's used and how it's perceived rather than a legal designation in your mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
I really like to think about the character. And so wilderness does have an official designation. We have areas out west, the Gila Wilderness Area, which are so vast. They are, nothing is ever isolated and just, you know, within itself complete. But they're certainly much more complete. You can have entire populations of moose and bear and lynx that can live just in that
Just
wilderness
there,
area.
but they don't need anyplace else.
Not the case in Vermont, not the case in the Northeast. So we need to think about what are the wilderness characteristics that we value, and how do we keep those alive within our lived-in landscape?
Are you getting, are you not getting some reaction from town officials? You know, we don't want anybody telling us what to do. We're not interested in this kind of thing. Leave us alone. Are you getting some of that?
Yeah, there are definitely some towns we've talked to who've said like, hey, you know, we just did our town plan, didn't come up as important to wildlife, we're not going to look at this right now. Yeah, thanks for telling us about it, but yeah, we're not ready for a conversation. And so we are definitely not trying to push a conversation on anybody. We're trying to say, There is a reason why you as a town are special, are significant. And so if you are interested, let's support that interest. Let's get more members of the community involved. And then how is it that you as a community want to take care of something that you value?
And you are getting some positive response from some towns.
Definitely.
And this is not just from your people, but from select boards and planning commissions?
From planning commissions, conservation commissions. There's a fabulous thing that happened in Salisbury, to give an example of a town. And so there the Conservation Commission said, okay, you know, here we are on the flank of the Green Mountains. We know wildlife comes through, so we have an interest. There's a very strong Conservation Commission there. But what wildlife comes through? Where exactly do they come through on their town? So what they decided to do is to have a citizen science initiative when in the winter they started walking the roads in their town. And there was great photographs of, like, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 of them walking the roads in the winter, because of course that's the great time to see tracks. So they took note over, I think it was 2 or 3 seasons, about where they were seeing bear track and moose track and bobcat track coming through. From that, they created a fabulous map and used that great, you know, green, yellow, red coding to show where there was the greatest occurrence of crossings. So you've always got that old kind of like adage as well, you know, do you try and protect a crossing area and the animals will come? Do you try and protect a crossing area where the animal's already there? And it'll be different town by town. So what they've seen as a result is they can now actually map and see there are 2 primary routes through the town of Salisbury, that they can see animals are moving from the fabulous swamps that we have in the Champlain Valley and are moving through the town and up into the flanks of the Green Mountains.
The whole idea of wilderness and wildland is kind of almost an aesthetic or a philosophical concept, because actually some wilderness, I wrote about this several years ago in a thing I did for when the paper here still had that Good Sunday magazine. A lot, you go to that newly designated wilderness down in the southern part of the Green Mountains, it's not all that pretty. It's just a lot of woods, and since they don't keep it up, it's hard to walk through. You know, in a way, it's much nicer and easier to walk through some state parkland that's been, where they trim the trail, you know, they maintain the trails.
Yeah.
They don't maintain trails in wilderness. If the big tree fell down, they leave it there, and you got to climb over it, and sometimes there aren't always vistas. It's valuable because people think it's valuable. It's the idea of, here's a chunk of land that you just don't touch, and there's a certain value to that, even if it isn't all that, even if it's no more fun to go do your hiking, fishing, and hunting on than a privately owned timber company land.
Yeah. You know, there's an active conversation right now within wilderness advocates, resource managers, about there are different types of wilderness.
Right.
And so there should be areas which are absolutely no touch, and it's just natural forces that happen there. There's also talk about areas that should be managed for their naturalness and managed to increase diversity, biodiversity. And there are also areas that should be managed to allow that recreation and to allow a breadth of recreation. But also, one of the key things about this ongoing conversation is it's not everything everywhere. You can't manage to one standard of wilderness and meet all of the hopes and expectations from both people and wildlife for that place.
Now, I suppose there's a faction of this group, which you might call the far left of the wilderness movement, that would disagree with that and say it all has to be no touch.
You know, if we look at our landscape, there is room for everything, and there is a right place for everything. There's a right place for the town. There's a right place for the farmlands around it. There's a right place for working forest land. There's a right place for ATV and motorized transportation. There is a right place for hikers only. There is a right place for no touch and a natural area. So what we all need to make sure that we do is we work together. It's not productive if we all decide that we have a certain point of view at the far spectrum. The most important thing for all of us who care about the natural world is to work together and to figure out what is the right treatment, the right touch, the right no touch for particular places on the landscape. There's room for all of us if we work together.